The day I found a strange hotel keycard in my wife's coat pocket was the day my world started to tilt on its axis. We'd been married for 7 years, a picture-perfect couple, or so I thought. But lately, things felt off. There was a distance between us, a coldness that hadn't been there before. When I asked about the keycard, she laughed it off, saying it must have been from a work conference months ago. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But my gut was screaming that something was wrong. The humiliation began subtly. It was the way she'd glance at her phone and smile, then quickly hide it when I walked into the room. It was the late nights at the office that became more frequent, the flimsy excuses that I was expected to just accept. Then came the public moments. At a friend's party, she introduced me to her colleague, Mark. The way they looked at each other, the inside jokes I wasn't a part of, it was like I was invisible. Later that night, a friend pulled me aside, his face full of pity, and told me he'd seen them having lunch, looking far too comfortable. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I was a joke, and it seemed like everyone knew it but me. Her behavior grew stranger. She started critiquing everything about me, my clothes, my job, even the way I chewed my food. It was like she was trying to build a case against me, to justify her own actions by making me the villain. She became a master of manipulation, twisting my words, making me question my own sanity. If I brought up my suspicions, I was insecure, controlling, paranoid. The arguments were exhausting. She'd turn on the tears, play the victim, and somehow, I'd end up being the one to apologize, just to have a moment of peace. The coldness was the worst part. The woman I had loved, the one I had shared my deepest secrets with, was now a stranger living in my house. There was no more warmth, no more affection, just a hollow shell where our love used to be. She and Mark grew bolder, feeling completely untouchable. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. I once saw his car parked a block away from our house late at night. The sheer audacity of it, the disrespect, it was staggering. They were living their best life, and I was just the collateral damage, the fool paying the mortgage. One night it all came crashing down. Came home early, hoping to surprise her, maybe try to talk things out one last time. I found them. It's not in our bed, but in the living room, laughing on the sofa where we had spent countless nights watching movies. The sight broke something inside me. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, shattering feeling. I just turned around and walked out. I drove for hours, with no destination in mind, tears streaming down my face. The man I was, the life I had built, it all felt like a lie. That night, sitting in my car on the side of a deserted road, I hit rock bottom. But in that darkness, a tiny spark of something else ignited. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was clarity. I was done being the victim. I was done being the punchline. The next morning I drove home, my face a mask of calm. When she asked where I'd been, I just said I needed to clear my head. She bought it, of course. In her arrogance, she couldn't imagine I was capable of anything but weakness. That was her first mistake. My breakdown was over. It was time for a comeback. I started to live a double life. To her face, I was the defeated, heartbroken husband she expected me to be. I played the part perfectly. But in secret, I was a detective in my own life. I began meticulously gathering evidence. A friend who was good with tech helped me install discrete recording devices in the house and a GPS tracker on her car. I started a new private bank account and began moving my funds. Every text message she thought she deleted, every email, every hotel receipt I found, it all went into a secure file. It felt clinical, detached. The emotional part of me was walled off. This was about strategy now. While gathering proof, I consulted a top-tier divorce lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the most ruthless one I could find. We didn't just plan for the divorce. We planned for the aftermath. We mapped out a strategy that was both legal and social. I learned about her financial dealings, the secret credit card she had, the money she was spending on him. I also started quietly reaching out to our mutual friends, not to gossip, but to subtly gauge their loyalties and drop hints about my struggles. I was laying a network of traps, and she was walking into every single one, completely oblivious. The day I chose for the big reveal was our anniversary. She had, predictably, planned a girls' night out. I had arranged a dinner party with our closest friends and family, including her parents. I told her it was a surprise to celebrate us. She was annoyed but had to show up. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone was there, all the people whose opinions she cared so much about. After the main course, I stood up, cleared my throat, and said I had a toast to make. I started by talking about love and trust. Then my tone shifted. I looked directly at her. I didn't yell. My voice was calm, almost chillingly so. I laid out the facts, one by one. I mentioned the dates, the times, the locations. I projected a photo onto the wall behind Mia, picture of her and Mark kissing, taken by a private investigator I'd hired. A collective gasp filled the room. Her face went from shock to horror to pure, unadulterated rage. Her parents looked like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. It was a complete and utter social implosion. But I wasn't done. The next morning, as she was still reeling, the legal papers were served. Everything I had gathered was presented to her lawyer. The recordings, the financial statements, the photos. Attempt to play the victim was dead on arrival. The prenuptial agreement we had was ironclad, and thanks to the infidelity clause and my mountain of evidence, she was left with practically nothing. The company where she and Mark worked got an anonymous tip, complete with proof of them using company resources for their affair. They were both fired. Her reputation was in tatters. She lost her job, her social circle, her family's respect, and her financial security, all in the span of 48 hours. I sold the house, the one filled with so many ghosts. I moved to a new city, started a new life. I don't feel triumphant or victorious. There's no joy in this kind of victory. Sometimes late at night I think about her, not the woman she became, but the girl I fell in love with all those years ago. The ending of our story isn't loud. It's quiet and haunting. It's the silence of an empty apartment, the space where life used to be. It's the quiet understanding that sometimes the only way to win is to burn everything to the ground and walk away from the ashes. Thanks for listening to my story, Dan. If you found this compelling, consider subscribing for more narrative deep dives.